Welcome back to my channel. The good news for all of you is that Sister Wives TLC producers did not show the footage from the Nevada National Guard ceremony and memorial for Garrison Brown. Thank goodness TLC was absolutely at the event. There are photographs of the cameraman Tim being there, all of that. And my sources said that they showed up ready to film, which caused a huge problem with the family. And so apparently, they didn't show the footage, which is good. I'm glad that that was not shown. However, the narrative of Kody wanting to be the grieving father, a man losing his son, absolutely took center stage in this episode. In fact, they did the pilgrimage that was the Wyoming trip to bury Garrison Brown. Now, in this episode, Janelle said that she wanted to bury him in Wyoming and that she wasn't someone that believed in cremation, and she always believed it was faith-based. But she said, I learned that that's not a faith-based, even though it kind of is. The AUB, generally speaking, doesn't agree with cremation, and they want their people buried, and so that is a belief within the FLDS. I don't know about the LDS. I'm speaking to the LDS and the AUB. But she said that she agreed to this burial to place him in a cemetery next to her mother, so they buried an urn, apparently not a casket. Either way, this episode was incredibly disjointed, very disjointed, and Kody and Robyn's quote-unquote pilgrimage to Wyoming had little to do with Garrison at all. In fact, this episode featured several key differences. Christine and David sat down and played cards and spoke about the loss. She spoke about the last messages she got from him. She talked about missing the warning sign and briefly alluded to the fact of these messages that she had received from him and what she could have done. David was able to speak to her in a way that he understood because he revealed his wife took her life as well and discussed the process he went through, having to tell his children feeling like a failure because it happened, blaming himself for it happening, and just the entire grief process that goes along with a passing like this. It was very clear that David was a good support for her, and it was also very clear that Christine was deeply hurt and just devastated by this loss, and she spoke about his plans, how he had just gotten into nursing school. So there was this, on the one hand, people that knew Garrison like Christine and his mom. Obviously, Janelle spoke so much in this, and I'll do a separate video about that, but Janelle and Christine sharing actual details about who Garrison was. And then Kody, much like what my source said, was making this all about him. It had very little to do with Garrison, and it had everything to do with Kody going to Wyoming in order to show his family the signs that he sold like 20 plus years ago to retailers, neon signs that he didn't make, that he only sold. So he sold a sign to a company, and so he took his kids on a tour, telling them about all of the signs he sold. I was just flabbergasted, to be honest. The entire portion of Robyn and Kody was so weird, and it was all about Kody. It had nothing to do with Garrison, and Robyn had to continue to interject into the talking head to try to remind people that they were there for Garrison. And it was very sad while this was happening, and it was so devastating for them. And this was not a time for them to be happy, but they were just there for Garrison. And this was a trip they did every year, though. Every year they go back, and if you have to overlay and speak over and narrate what we're watching and try to tell us what we're seeing is different than what's on camera, you're lying, because what they showed was them walking around Kody while Kody talked about the ugly signs that he sold like 25 years ago. And the fact that these companies haven't updated their signs since, that is wild to me. And then Kody going on and on and on about the signs which nobody cared about, obviously. Then watching some sort of gun show type thing, like a Wild West show, but then it started raining. So then they had to go inside the hotel, and they went to eat. They went into the saddle shop that Kody made the sign for, and it was very weird. The guy was already mic'd up, so obviously it was pre-planned that he was gonna go in there and talk to him. And he's making these saddles that are like $20,000, and I'm like, you have a $20,000 saddle that you're making, but you have that sign from 2000. Wow. And I'm not saying that you should have to update your sign, but neon signs do have a lifespan, and they do eventually burn out. But more importantly, none of this had to do with Garrison. None of it. And what I thought was very strange was while they're on this trip, they apparently took the urn with them in the car, and Robyn says that Garrison was a passenger in their vehicle on the way to Wyoming, which it hit me really in the stomach because I thought you wouldn't have allowed Garrison in your car when he was alive, and now he's in your car when he's passed away, and you're crying about the fact that you're on a pilgrimage with a guy that you wouldn't even allow in your house when he was alive. And a lot of what Robyn spoke about was nothing to do with Garrison and being sad that he was gone, but a lot of what, Kody was going to go through and the grief that Kody was going to experience and having the, proper coping mechanisms and grief so that it's not done incorrectly. So it's a healthy way of grieving, almost implying that this pilgrimage or the way that Kody was acting that day was not healthy. I couldn't figure it out because obviously Kody was making the whole day about himself, and it had nothing to do with Garrison, and literally no one cared about these stupid signs. I mean, Robyn even rolled her eyes at one point, and then even at dinner, they didn't talk about Garrison. Instead, Robyn made a conversation about how Kody's dad loved the Wild West, and he was named after Buffalo Bill, whose last name was Kody, and then his dad changed it to a K. And then they got into a conversation about Buffalo Bill being a ladies' man, and then Kody denied that he was a ladies' man. And then I don't know. It was just, none of it was about Garrison. Again, none of this was about Garrison. It was about Kody going back to Wyoming to brag about Kody going to his hometown to brag about who Kody is. But we already had this episode. Kody, do you not remember? When we went back to level years and years and years ago for the same event, and you brought all of your wives, and you went public for the first time, and you remember? You went boating with Ken on the lake, and then all of your classmates confronted you about being a polygamist, and that girl that you had a crush on was sitting there, and Robyn was there, by the way. So you've already done this pilgrimage to Wyoming, Kody. You're just reframing the narrative with your current kids that you're with. And then the other thing that I noticed is that other siblings of Garrison spoke about him. So in this episode, we hear from Addie, we heard from Savannah, and we heard from Gabriel, okay? But even though Kody's children with Robyn were on camera, none of them uttered a word about Garrison. Nothing. Not one word. Not, we miss him. We're so sorry that he's gone. They said nothing. So for whatever reason, they include this weird conversation about Buffalo Bill being a ladies' man, and then Brianna shrugging her shoulders and imitating Kody while then sticking her tongue out and flapping it, which most people know what that means when they do that with their tongue. I thought it was so weird. I was like, what are they talking about? Why are they making this conversation about Buffalo Bill into something sexual, about Kody having wives and being a ladies' man? And then I also realized grossly that this entire family, they sit around and they just talk to Kody about how cool Kody is. And then Kody gets to talk about himself, about what a stud he is, which further proves that Kody gets his validation and worth from his family worshiping him. You don't hear Robyn talking about her good old days, or Robyn talking about herself, or the kids even talking about themselves. The whole entire event that they were doing, or this whole filming scenario, was just so inappropriate when you consider that a child is dead, and this is at a dinner on a trip for his burial, where no one's talking about Garrison. I recognize that people grieve at different points, and they have waves and life goes on. I completely understand. We have in my family gone through loss. I have also in my family never once made a single dollar off the death of anyone in my family. I've never broadcast my grief for clout or money for a show, and I've never used my grief or my lack of grief for a storyline. And watching Kody and Robyn try to push out tears for a kid that they disregarded, didn't care about, kicked out of the house, wouldn't allow in their house, had no relationship with, and then watching them try to rewrite history and act as though we've forgotten about how they treated him, what Garrison felt about them, the abuse that he endured because of them, and how Robyn was not welcome or wanted at any of these services. For Garrison never would have wanted Robyn there ever. He had such eye for her to test, and for her to be like, oh, he's a passenger in my car. Oh, the graveside is going to be so sad. "Oh, we love him. We're putting him to rest. We're putting him to rest." And then Kody trying to squeeze out a tear while speaking about his son and doing fun things because he, again, I feel like needs to justify that this whole everything we just watched had nothing to do with Garrison. Until that very moment he says, "And then on Sunday, we're going to go to the graveyard service, and I hope to God they do not show the service where they bury him. There are some things that do not need to be public, and that would be one of those things." And then for Kody to admit that a poster, which was at the Nevada National Guard's memorial, okay, that poster is in his garage, which further proves that Garrison is not welcome in Kody's home with Robyn, even after his death. I understand that Kody likes to spend time in his garage, but why would you put a memorial poster for your son, which is from his service for the military of him, in his fatigues for the military in your garage? You have a home that's filled with ugly art, very ugly art walls, filled to the brim with ugly art. But you don't have space on the walls of your home for the picture of your son who served the military and this country. He's in your garage still, proving that Robyn does not want Garrison in her home, proving this is all fake. If you love your child, put the photo in your home. There is absolutely no reason for that to be in your garage. That's like an afterthought. Not to mention, garages aren't winterized. They live in Flagstaff, which is cold. In time, that photo will be damaged because it's in a garage, period. And I also want to make a point to say that Kody lied in this episode where he said that after his service, which was in Flagstaff, and then after the service in Nevada, which they didn't speak about, thank God. So, again, I'm glad that the message was clear to TLC. We don't want this on television, right? He says, "Oh, I left his remains with his brothers, and a couple months later, I went to go pick them up. I left them as though they were his. I left his remains with his brothers." Kody never had custody of those remains, and he never left them with anyone. They were released to Janelle and her sons had the custody of those until Kody apparently picked them up. Although I don't know that he was actually in Kody's car or not, because obviously they didn't show an urn on the show, so I don't know. But to allude to the fact that he left them implies that he did that as though he had it to begin with, which he didn't. And I know people have a hard time believing that he wasn't on the birth certificate, but when Janelle filed for bankruptcy in 1997, she did not list Kody as a father. She listed herself and only herself as a parent to 6 children, with no spouse or no other parent that could claim these children. In order for her to list them that way, she's stating that he doesn't have claim over these kids. And interestingly, 7 years or 8 years later, Kody then claimed her kids on his bankruptcy with Meri, even though he's not on the birth certificate. So again, Kody's just a fraud all the way around. No matter what happens here, this was not about Garrison. This is again proving this was a storyline that Kody created about Kody being the grieving father on a journey of losing his son in his grief process. Thank the Lord the storyline of Robyn being the abused wife by the family was left on the cutting room floor. But Robyn's overarching trope on this and her talking heads was I need him to find, healthy coping mechanisms for his grief. Robyn only worried about how Kody's behavior will impact her, not whether or not she's grieving for Garrison or how it impacts her. It was like, well, death can really change people, and I hope he finds good ways to handle this, because selfishly she doesn't want to have to deal with Kody's grief because she hates Garrison. That's how I read it. And why is his picture in the garage? Because Robyn hated Garrison. Garrison hated her. So it's all about them. It was nothing to do with Garrison. And this was filmed in June or July. But the stuff with the scene with Savannah and Janelle that I'll talk about later this week was filmed in April. So they weren't even filmed at the same time. And if they're on this pilgrimage and they're with the family, why is there no evidence of Kody interacting with his other children? Why isn't Kody there for his other kids on camera? Oh, that's right, because they want nothing to do with him because of how he treated Garrison, and that should tell you everything you need to know. Do you see any evidence of them with the other kids? No, it's just disgusting. It's all a storyline. I feel sad for the rest of the family that's dealing with this. I do not feel sad for Kody Robyn, and I hate that they're doing this to Garrison in death. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate your support. Until next time, take care and goodbye.